Hi everyone, I'm Nancy Leon, the training manager here at Emily's List, and I'm really excited for you all to be here today for our Get Out the Vote webinar. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn about GOTV with us. So to get started, I just want to give you a little bit of background on what Emily's List is. We're the largest resource for women in politics. We help recruit and train pro-choice Democratic women to run for office. Since our founding in 1985, we've helped elect over 100 women to the House, 26 to the Senate, 16 governors, and nearly 1,100 women to state and local office. We've also had over 50,000 women reach out to us and say they're ready to run for office. So these trainings really give you the tools to set the foundation for your campaign journey and also for GOTV. So just some webinar norms for today. Invest in our time together, put your phone away if you can, participate in some chats that we have going on, just so that you can get everything that you can from this webinar. Remember that all questions are valid, so please type them in the webinar chat box. And also, I know that some of you sent in questions before, so thank you very much for those. We're going to be addressing those today. And lastly, all our slides are internal, and we will be sending out a recording of the webinar for you after this training. So I just want to introduce, So our agenda for today is to welcome and housekeeping announcements. What is GOTV, GOTV messaging, GOTV best practices, some questions, GOTV right now, and some Q&A. So I'm just going to hand off our training today to Becky Rothmeyer, our state and local regional director for the Midwest and West, and I'll be back for a Q&A section. So take it away, Becky.
Hello all, I'm so happy to be here today and glad that you could join us for this webinar on GOTV. So our webinar goals today are learn best practices of a GOTV program, develop key GOTV messaging, plan for GOTV with vote by mail that's happening right now, as well as digital tools, and understand the data that you need to collect in order to win, because that's what we want you all to do, is win. We're going to talk a little bit through the basics, and then we're going to dig in more on those key pieces that we just of our goals here. So number one, so what is GOTV? Not GoTV, GOTV. It is get out the vote. It is the final push of your campaign. So this focuses on making sure your voters get out to make a plan to vote and actually do vote. Traditionally, this is the last 2 weeks of the campaign, but obviously this year it is not going to look like that with such huge numbers of vote by mail and other options due to COVID that people are looking at. So GOTV messaging. First of all, you've been running your whole campaign or working on these campaigns this whole time, working with your messaging. And now when we go into GOTV, this sort of, it does a shift. So scripts and messaging should get to people in order to articulate their plan to vote. Some of the messaging that is the best is, hey, everybody's voting. The election will be so close. Your vote really matters. We need you. Calling people a voter and make sure that that's something that they see as sort of a responsibility, as a piece of their identity when you're talking about what they can do to make a difference. And talking to folks about how they're a leader in their community, that their example matters, that people see what they're doing and that they are leading by good example by voting. GOTV messaging that is not helpful, and Brittany also says it's not helpful. Do not say that voter turnout is low. That doesn't help people to be excited about stuff. We're social animals, so we want to be involved when all the cool people are involved. Don't use scare tactics. That is not helpful when we're talking about voting. You don't want to be like, well, it's going to be really difficult this year. There's going to be really long lines. It's important to talk to people about how voting is easy. And we work really hard to make sure that voting is as easy and painless for folks as we can. And do not say, we know you didn't vote last time, or any sort of threatening pieces. bring people around. They're not excited to come out and support you, to go out and vote in general, and often feel really defensive when that type of thing comes up. So know that that's not the best tactic, not the best way to talk about GOTV. So now that you know how to talk about it a little bit, what not to say, what not to do, we want to talk about the best practices in targeting the folks that you're talking to get them out to actually vote. So research the voting in your area of the state. There's early voting, there's in-person voting, vote by mail, there can be no excuse absentee voting, absentee voting. It's very important to know specifically what is in your state, and you can find more information on your Secretary of State's page specifically on what the rules are and the laws in the area that you're in. So research the voting that is in your area of the state. Find out how many people you will be reaching out to. This will tell you what kind of volunteer shifts you need and that kind of thing. So coming up with that number to make sure that you have your GOTV universe for yourselves, for your campaign. Who are the definite supporters that you have out there and the likely supporters? Do you have any access to the voter modeling here? With that, you're really looking at who are the supporters that you know that already exist out here, and those are the people that you're going to want to target first, and that you're going to want to ask for help as well in getting targeting out there. So you'll need to make a line somewhere. This is the hard part about targeting, right? It could be at, we won't talk to these Democrats because they'll turn out and support for sure. So we're not going to talk to them because they definitely will be there with us and we don't need to spend time talking to them. Don't call Republicans, people that you know are definitely not with you and aren't going to be with you. This is not persuasion time specifically when you're trying to get people out to vote and do the things that you're asking them to do. In nonpartisan races, it's important to call likely Dems and really look at that slightly bigger universe, but probably smaller numbers. And in partisan races, it's important to also make sure that you're including Democrats who are less likely to vote. Now this year, since it's a presidential election year, that tends to be a smaller number. A lot more people come out in presidential years, but it's very important to take a look at this and make sure that they're in your universe. If you can find modeling from your local state party or anywhere else that you might have access to, because that can help you also to identify who should be in your universe and what that should look like. And then who else is turning out these folks? Like your campaign is not the only thing that's out there asking people to vote and what they're doing. So it's important when you're making your plan to make sure that you know, is your state party doing something? What does the coordinated campaign look like? What is the Biden campaign doing this year? What is their plan? Where are they going to be turning people out? And that type of thing, because that allows you to choose your GOTV universe, but also focus some of your time on persuasion calls that you still might need to make, moving those voters over to you before you can get them out to vote and do that work. So really try to not double up efforts where you can, because as we noted before, strong Dems or folks that you know for sure are going to come out and vote, you don't have to spend your time on them. So finding the folks that will be responsive to more messaging and more talking to you and hearing what you have to say. So those are important pieces to think about, as well as the region that you're in and what that looks like when you're planning out what your GOTV plan is specifically. And my computer just got a little slow there, sorry about that. GOTV best practices with this. So tell every voter, make sure that every voter hears these three things. What is their polling location? What are the polling hours? And any other specific requirements that are part of the laws or rules in your state or locality for that. Do people need voter IDs or anything like that? Those are the basics. They must always be part of that. We want people to know that. We want people to hear that over and over. Are there questions that on the basics of GeoTV right now? And I think Nancy can see those questions if anybody has specific ones.
Yep. So here we're going to go through a couple questions, and thank you so much for going through the best practices, by the way. It's really good to know like what kind of language to use and specific things that people need to know when you're calling them or texting them or whatever it might be. So thank you. The first question we have is, what do you mean by a GeoTV universe and what is VAN?
All right, so VAN is the Voter Activation Network. It depends on your campaign if you have access to this or not. It is the overall database that Democratic campaigns use to track who the voters are and what their preferences may be. There's ID calls that go out here. So in the VAN, people will be marked as Democrats or Republicans, or if they're voting for a certain candidate or supporting someone. So that being said, that is one place that you can take that you can pull a universe of people. So that's the folks that you need to talk to specifically and being able to target them from the VAN. If that's not available to you, taking a look at what your overall voter records look like, determining what information you can, and finding the folks who there's still ways to break this down of finding the folks who vote every single election, finding the folks that just vote during presidential elections, and so forth. So there's multiple options. I would suggest getting in touch with your state party if you have additional questions on any of those things, or finding other folks, and we can probably help in the Run to Win community overall as well to help you break down some of those other pieces if you don't have access to the VAN.
Awesome. Got it. Thank you. Cool. So our next question is, if my county party is running a GeoTV program, should I just latch onto that one or also run my own?
So yes, this is where everything comes in. I say always make sure that you are running your own GeoTV program. Now, it doesn't have to be gigantic, but it's important that you're running your program to make sure you have any of your persuadable voters that need to be talked to. The county party isn't going to be tracking that. And this is where we talked a little bit about earlier how it's important to make sure you know what everyone else is doing so you're not duplicating efforts. And here is where it's important to talk to your county party or whoever else that might be, ask what universes they're reaching out to, and then you can plan your universes of voters that are not touched by their work. So then they're turning out your voters for you, and you have time to persuade and turn out other supporters who might not be as strong or might not be as like often as frequent of voters and that type of thing. So it's very good. It's very important that you run your own GeoTV program along with in complement to the program that's being run elsewhere.
Right, that totally makes sense. Like working smarter, not necessarily harder. Got it. All right. Next question is, and we've got two more. So why is having voters articulate a plan so important?
Yes, so this goes back to actual science. The things that we have found when doing studies on all of this is having voters make an actual plan with a real person on the like talking to them or texting with them, whatever this might be in this weird COVID situation that we have. Making a plan is very important. We know that it makes people more likely to actually vote and follow through with the thing that they have told you. So, for example, if you call someone and say, hey, I'm running for office. I'm hoping you'll go out and vote. Do you plan to vote? And they're like, yep. And you're like, okay, great. And hang up the phone. That leaves them with less responsibility. So when you're talking with folks, you say, great, when do you plan to vote? How do you plan to vote? What time, if they're going to go vote in person, you ask really specific questions, such as, what time do you plan to go vote? Do you plan to go with other people? Do you have transportation to your polling location? So similar questions can be asked about vote by mail or any of those types of things. Have you requested your ballot? Have you filled out your ballot? Have you put it in the mail? Or do you want to drop it off? Do you plan to drop it off at a voting location? Can I give you the address? Or Is there a time you're planning to take that in? All of those more specific questions work with people in general to make them go, oh yeah, now I have made this plan. I already talked about it. I'm going to go do it. We see scientifically that people are more likely to go actually do their voting, actually get the vote in that you want as well when you're asking those follow-up questions.
Got it. And I'm sure that like one-to-one interaction also kind of helps with commitment, and people always need reminders too, so why not?
Always.
All right, awesome. So the last question we have is, if I'm in a really red area, I probably can't rely on large campaigns like Biden to focus on GOTV there, but every vote really counts in my race. Should I still try to reach out to moderates or Republicans since I'm a local candidate?
Yes, and I think this is very specific to each race. So I want to say don't reach out to folks who are not going to be with you at all. And folks who are unlikely to be with you, make sure that they are at the very, very end of anybody that you would be talking to. It is better to go through multiple of your universes of people that you know are most likely to be persuaded, or low frequency voters who are Democrats. So, you know, folks who maybe just don't vote all the time, that's a better place to focus your efforts than to move on to Republicans right away. Understanding that it is a red area, but also, especially at this point in time, there's some pretty big divisions between everyone. There's a lot of challenges just being associated with a party right now, and in working to persuade Republicans is going to net you a lot less votes and support than working on Democrats who, you know, have identified as Democrats, have done stuff before, and just maybe need an encouragement to vote, which is a little bit easier this year with vote by mail, but it's a better use of your time and your resources and likely to result in better returns. So when you win your election.
True, true. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Becky. So I'm going to disappear now and you can get on with the rest of the training.
Wonderful. So hopefully I generate more questions for you all as we go. All right, so I would love you to talk to us right now. How are you approaching or seeing others approach get out the vote right now as time goes on? Please feel free to type that into the chat box. Yeah, great. So seeing a lot of vote by mail, some digital tactics, that's great, absolutely. So number one, vote by mail. You all are genius, that's how it works, right? As soon as the voters have the ballot in their mailboxes, it's election day. So for some places, those ballots have already started dropping. Some are happening next week, some are later in the season, but just know that especially this year, as soon as these come out, that is voting time. So make sure that you're encouraging folks to make a plan and get it back in. There's a little bit of what we talked about of feeling responsible to make sure you do the thing that you're going to do and what your plan is, how you're going to turn in your ballot, that type of work. So this is what you want to encourage right now. If folks have to actively request a ballot, make sure that you are getting all of the information that you can from your local party or your Secretary of State's office. This, of course, depends on the level of campaign that you're running right now and what you have access to. But you want to make sure that you can get the data on who has requested an absentee ballot. That does not always mean that they will vote by mail. I just want to note that, but it's more likely if somebody has requested a ballot that they plan to vote by mail. So that is very important, along with, of course, all of this, knowing your rules, knowing the laws in the area, and what is important there. So COVID has obviously thrown a really huge wrench in everybody's plans. So we want to talk a little bit more about adjusting your GOTV plan and what that might look like. And this is a great shot, I'm told, of LeBron James, but I'm not actually a basketball fan, so I only know 23 as Michael Jordan's number. But I'm guessing either way, it's great. This is what we want people to do, get their votes in by mail. So it's important for your campaign plan to adjust in the best way possible for vote by mail, right? Before voters receive their ballots, and most folks in the country are still at that point. I know a few have been dropped at this point, but before the voters receive their ballots, you want to get the message out about how and when to apply for those mail-in ballots. If an application is necessary, you'll want to make sure you're doing this while you're persuading voters to vote for you too. So this actually covers a couple of those universes that are really important to you in winning your election. So it's important you get to do both of those pieces, but especially with the virus right now, it's so much more effective to be able to persuade someone and have them request a ballot, and then you can follow up with them in a couple of weeks. So really thinking about how you keep holding people accountable to the things that they say that they're going to do or want to do as well. Making sure that you're getting messages out to all of these folks once they get their ballots is really important, and also tracking all of the information that you have of who has requested ballots, and when you're following up and talking with folks, making sure that you know who has turned theirs in, who was planning to do that, that type of thing, so that you can be adjusting your universe as you go. You're not contacting people who have already clearly voted and are like, why are you spending your time on me? So making sure that you use the full suite of tactics that you have as well here. Mail, phone, text, digital, all of those things to get your message out, and to check back in and work with your supporters and the people who are going to be voting for you. Layering those tactics is very important, and definitely the most effective way of getting people to respond to what you're asking them to do. So much of this is referred to as chasing ballots. So especially with vote by mail this year, there's going to be a lot of ballot chasing, because we're not just trying to turn people out to go to a physical location and stand in line and make sure that they get there. Now we're kind of going inside of their homes. We're encouraging them to not just throw everything in a giant mail pile. We want them to make sure that they are focusing on the things that are important for winning the election, right? So once your supporters have their ballots, they have to vote and vote for you. I think that's really, really important just to remember. There's a lot of pieces to this, and GOTV did not get easier this year because of mail-in voting. It got more challenging, and so remember that too as you're thinking what your plans are going to look like and how important the chasing ballots is. It's important to try to time your mail that is coming, so that it's also when ballots are coming in, right? We want folks to be able to see your name as soon as like they're also getting their ballots, so they remember you, they know who you are. They might walk in the house with their ballot and a piece of mail from you and be like, oh yeah, this is the person that was great, or they might have gotten it a little bit beforehand. So that's a really key piece that could be helpful, especially for those go-getters who get their ballot and then they turn around and get it back into the mail. So thinking through that, making sure that that is, as much as you can, timed out well. Obviously, there's some challenges with the United States Postal Service at this point, so also thinking that through, but also, timing it as best as you can. It's not the end of the world if it doesn't show up, but if you can, that's the best time. And then from there, the timeline is to make sure that you're spreading out mail across the weeks that you are trying to get people to vote. So, for example, folks that are starting voting next week, when we're anticipating ballots, when early voting starts in states on the 17th of September, it's important to have, a piece of mail that arrives around that time, hopefully on the Thursday right before it, or on the same day that ballots arrive. But then it's also important to think through, to time it out until absentee ballots can no longer be requested, especially. So think about look at the timeline that you have, what ballots need to be in by what time. In many states, you can drop off ballots up until election day. but at that point you can't request a ballot and there's not time for it to be mailed. So you really need to sort of walk backwards and figure out what that timeline looks like when you're going to cut off doing calls and encouraging people to request vote by mail. So in some places, I know that that's in October. We're just going straight, not vote by mail. It may be different in your race, so really look at that and what makes sense there. And then we also want to make sure that the messages encourage voters to do this work. Once again, going back to the pieces of, this is not a place for scare tactics. This is not like a negative space. This is important for folks to see, to have the information that they need, and that really includes the important dates that they need to get things in. I would make sure to sort of cushion this. I mean, I think everybody is aware that, USPS is having some challenges and probably a little bit nervous about it as well. So it's helpful for you to also sort of provide a roadmap for your candidates, or for your, apologies, for your voters to be able to more simply get their ballots in and that kind of thing. You're going to be following up. This is not just going to be one piece of mail or one piece of, communication that says, hey, get your ballot and make sure you vote for me. This is what we just talked about in the last one, where you're going to be using a lot of tactics. It's important to layer those and to make a number of connections with folks. So digging into the chase tactics a bit more here. So here's some of the ways that you're going to be able to layer your information and get more of the results that you're looking for here. So a key tactic to getting out the vote is encouraging people to make a concrete plan. This is what we talked about a little when I answered that question before. This makes them way more likely to follow through on it. The same applies for vote by mail. So now we're just expanding the timeline of what we're normally doing. How, when, and where people will be voting. Have they requested a ballot at this point? Have they received their ballot? Have they mailed a ballot? How can you, do they need a location to be able to drop this off? What does that look like? How can you help them accomplish them completing their ballot and getting it in? So anywhere along those steps that you and your campaign can be helpful is important when you're looking at this. I've certainly sat on the phone with people while they requested ballots online and all of those sorts of things to like walk people through what that is. You can also walk people through instructions on their absentee ballot. Sometimes you have to make sure that the ballot is in a blank envelope and then an outside envelope, and make sure it's signed. Whatever those rules might be in your state, that's also important and a very valuable thing you can do with folks over the phone or while texting with people. So all of those tactics are important, and this is a lot of very personal work that you're going to be doing on GOTV for sure. For your digital strategy, you should switch the content of your ads. We talked about this a little before too, from persuasion to GOTV when the ballots are mailed. So remember that your GOTV timeline is going to move up, obviously, to as soon as people start getting ballots in the mail. And people are going to make decisions earlier because they get the ballot, they want to complete it. This is important to them. They're not thinking through it entirely in all of those same ways that they do in other years. So what do we mean by complementing mail strategy here? I want to say that put yourself in a perspective of a targeted voter. Number one, the message about you and your campaign and what you're asking voters to do should be consistent, whether they're interacting with your campaign via mail, phones, text, digital, or anything else. Two, if the election day has gone from 1 day to 30 or 50, as we're currently looking at, how are you spreading out all of your contacts across the voting period? Every week, are your targeted voters getting a combination of different contacts from your campaign? Important, and this is also where it's important to make sure that you're tracking everyone and can pull folks out of your universe when needed, so you're not following up with 3 different contacts to someone who has already turned in their ballot. That is a waste of your resources and it's a waste of their time and unfortunate. So really, I want to also say that, you know, the messaging here applies to digital across, you know, dropping the persuasion pieces just to focus on people getting out voting. You can learn more also about our digital trainings on the Run to Win website. We have additional trainings because they're so deep. There's so much more information there. So I want to direct you over there. There's more information. We want to provide as much support as we can on here. And I want to, yeah, those are the pieces. I think I covered them before I looked at this whole piece here. So those are really important pieces of all of the things that you're going to be doing with your tactics and to make sure that people are getting their ballots in. So GeoTV texting. So we've moved from, you know, general to digital and now to texting. So voter ID, persuasion, and GeoTV, all of these things can be done by texting, and you know, COVID has really sort of moved up that timeline for everyone. So we're getting even more familiar with it than we have been in the past. These universes can mirror the same thing that you're familiar with for phone banks. You're still looking for the same people to be able to, you know, do persuasion with, or your strong Dem voters, you know, to be able to request volunteers from, that type of thing. So it's all, you're looking at the same people that you would if you were setting up a phone bank or a similar work to that. You can use tags to follow up with specific audiences here, which is nice because you can break people down into even smaller groups that you can talk more specifically to. So some examples of this would be low propensity voters, persuasion voters. If you want to focus on women, for example, or something like that, you can keep track of why people are on that list and what is going to be most specific to be able to talk with them about and message to those folks specifically. So that's a cool thing. We like that. And voting is cool also. And we want to prepare people for in-person voting as well. So we want to encourage safe voting practices like masks and distancing. We love all that. We want to keep everybody healthy and good to go. Know the rules. It's important for you to know the rules to be able to convey them to voters also about what options are for voting day of as we get to the actual election day. What does that look like? What are people going to be asked to do? Are polling places moving somewhere else? In some places they're moving polling places to much larger areas so they can still have people voting, but they've moved to maybe a gym or a stadium. Those are important things to make sure you're aware of, and any changes that are happening just because of COVID this time. If someone has, it's also important to think about if someone has their ballot, so that would be an absentee ballot that they requested. Is there some place that they can drop it off on election day? A lot of places have the drive-through site. They did for the primary at least, so we're anticipating they'll do it for the general. Or you might be able to walk into any polling place and give them, you know, hand over absentee ballot or any other sort of piece, but that might be, it's a good option for folks if they're going right up to election day, but have an absentee ballot already, to not have to stand in line, to not have to maybe expose themselves to as many people as they wouldn't want to, or as they're, you know, concerned about there. So that's an important piece. I want to also note that it's important to have the voter protection hotline information available, but not provide it unless you're sort of asked to, right? It's not, number one, it's not something you want to like provide just because people kind of freak out about it. Like, oh, why do I need the voter protection hotline information? It's, you know, is something wrong? Should I make sure I'm on there? We want to keep these lines open. But we also want to make sure that people, you know, are not worried or overly scared, but that people do have the resources they need. I think most often the voter protection hotline, as I've used it in the past, is primarily for language barriers and issues related to that. Depending on the state that you're in, voter IDs or questions about IDs or different provisional voting or different issues that might come up in your state. These are places where the voter protection hotline is important, and we want to make sure that your campaign, everybody in your campaign that's talking to voters, does have access to those numbers and can help people get the information they need. But overall, we want voting to be easy, not take a ton of time, and be something that people can do in the course of their regular lives. So that is really what we're focusing on, and what we, hope that everybody is working hard to do within their states. So I think that we talk about this a lot in every training. I'm not sure how many you've been on, but it's very important. All of this stuff comes down to data. You are going to be able to track this and be most successful when you are actually tracking all of your data. So if you have the van through your state party, make sure you're connecting with them right now. Ask what the plan is, how they will be collecting data on the ballots that have been requested, which ones have been mailed, which ones have been returned. How are they going to share with your campaign? Will they do a weekly update? Will they do a daily update when they know the information about what ballots have come in? Do you need to upload any lists so that they have who your voters are? What does that look like? It's very important that you know that, so you can be planning, how you're going to be tracking all of your ballots. And if you don't have a state party, or they won't be doing this, connect with your local election authorities. So that might be city or county clerks, board of elections, like I said, potentially the Secretary of State's office, and ask these same questions. Sometimes they'll put up a file that you can download and check yourself. Sometimes they send out emails. Others have asked people to come in person to get a disc or a printout. So these are important to know now so that you can make plans for that. You don't want to be caught in the middle of balloting without having figured out how you're going to track this data, what it looks like, and who your voters are going to be and how they plan to vote. This is so important. This is what you've been working your whole time for. So really think about that data and why it's important to have all of that. Finally, in this, it's really, really important to know your community, obviously. What do people care about? What are they doing? What do they believe about elections? So this is a cultural piece that's important, and you all know your communities best. How do you talk to them about it? We can give you tactics and tell you that it's important to make sure that you're making plans with people about how to vote. But everybody's scripts might be a little bit different, and talking about the issues that are important and why people would want to and should go out and vote. It's important to remember here also that there are different communities, particularly rural communities, especially folks of color in rural communities and other places. There can be a lot of challenges. So limited access to, or even just general trust in the mail system. I think we're all there a little bit, having received a ton of important but very late mail. And they want to make sure that they have a way to put a tangible way to put a ballot in a box, or make sure that it is there. So one, there are often drop-off sites which host in-person early voting. So that's important for you to check in your state if that is available. That is a good opportunity and good option to get folks there. And it could also be something that's organized through your party or through your campaign to potentially drive people to those places to drop off their ballots if necessary. But then there's also, a number of states also have tracking through their Secretary of State's office. So that's important to check what that looks like. So I'm in Minnesota, and I could, if I complete my ballot and send it in, I can check online to see if my ballot has been received. Not every place does that, but it's important. A lot of states do. So that's another important piece, and that's something that you could help with. Help your voters also with, to figure out where their ballot is. So making sure that you're helping to support the folks that don't feel so comfortable with this. And then finally, if you're doing GOTV during a big event, you may not have people pick up the phone. This is an easy thing to forget, especially when we are all working on campaigns for so long and all day, every day. Football is starting. So really thinking about when, you know, those big games or other stuff might be on a Sunday afternoon, not really the ideal time to call people and have a longer conversation. So just keep those things in mind, because we want to make sure that like people are coming out and voting and being, you know, feeling good about what they're doing, not hassled or hurried or don't want to talk to you because of some reason that has nothing to do with you. So just keep that in mind with your community and what that might look like. Volunteers are your other key piece. I mean, they are the key piece of GOTV. I want to be clear. This is not just another key piece. This is it. This is the time that everybody like realizes how close you are to actual election day, and it's so important to get out. And the message now is critical to making sure that people are there. So make sure that your volunteers are following all of the laws that you all have researched at this point, and you know the information that you need to, along with numbers and anything else that they may need, so that they have very specific and helpful information for your voters. They'll have people say that they got another call or they're not voting for anyone, or that if they get another call, they're not going to be voting for anyone. This is generally, nah, it's just never true. Like, this is not about what that looks like. Often people just are trying to get you off the phone. So don't take them out of your universe until you actually have a conversation with them or have confirmed that their vote is in. So just keep that in mind. There's going to be multiple groups calling sometimes, but you want to make sure that that person is voting for you and has gotten their ballot in whatever way that might be. So also on election day, making sure that you're on the phone instead of, this is the hard part, being on phones is more important than standing out on a street corner with a lawn sign or anything like that. You know, people get very excited to be able to go out and jump around and like encourage cars to honk and that type of thing, but it is so much less effective at getting people to actually vote, get their vote in and actually be part of this, that it's important to talk to your volunteers about how being on the phone, calling through voters, you know, doing text messaging with voters, some sort of live interaction with people is absolutely the most effective way to get people actually out doing the thing that you need them to do. And it's literally for one day. So everybody can do it, and then they can stop when your polls close. So that is our basics on what GOTV looks like. It was not too overwhelming, but the important takeaways here are you want to help people make a plan to vote and make that voting feel easy, exciting, and make sure that they know they're important and their vote is important. Understanding that who you need to target and who you can for your personal GOTV push, what other folks are doing as well, what's your plan? Have a clear plan for your vote by mail program and your ballot chase, but also preparing for, you know, in-person voting on election day. So that's the place where there's more work instead of less work this year. And then make sure, as always, to get the data, be tracking that data, and know where you stand in all of this. Now we're going to open it up for questions.
Yeah, I'm back. So we do have some questions, and thanks for going through that. I definitely also really like the parts about like texting or like sending like ballot chasing, especially during COVID times. It's like really important that people stay safe. So I think very pertinent to our times right now. So our first question is, have you seen any creative ways of doing GOTV during the pandemic?
I mean, creative, not okay. Let's say doing a skywriter is creative but not effective. So most importantly, I think it's a big deal to really focus on what is most effective and what we know works with voters. So, you know, creative ideas should include at least the principles that we've been talking about here. So, you know, there may be some opportunities to do like a Zoom party with folks or something else like that, where you could, you know, have everybody pair up and talk through, like, okay, what's your voting plan? Or I'm going to be your voting buddy and hold you accountable, you know, and those could be supporters of your campaign or something else that looks like. But make sure that, you know, you're not sort of, the most important piece is to make sure that you're using tactics that we know work, you know, this is a time to experiment with some of our campaign tactics in general, but with GOTV, this is it's so straightforward and clear cut about how we know to get people to vote and what they're going to do, that's really the most important thing, is just pound it out, get through the calls, move through those text messages and other ways of contacting people, because that's really the most important thing that can happen here.
Super true. I do think like the one-on-one, even if it's through the phone, is super effective. But I do know that one of our Emily's List candidates kind of cut her turf for canvassing and kind of went to do lit drop, and then instead of like actually knocking on people's doors, called afterwards to let them know that they had dropped lit, and then had that conversation through that way. So that's definitely like can be more of a creative way. And then I know some people have been doing like drive-in rallies, just kind of getting people together in a socially distant way. So I think those can also be some ideas for other people. Our next question,
and those are great examples. Oh, sorry. Those are great examples of layering, also layering your different tactics and getting those connects with people to really get them understanding that it's time, get out and vote.
Yeah, exactly. So true. All right. So our next question is, what is the voter protection hotline?
So every state has a voter protection hotline of some sort. So this is important to go through, just as we said the resources before, through your Secretary of State's office. Maybe this is your city or county clerk. Normally it is a statewide hotline that is run on election day by volunteer lawyers. So that's just something to look up in your state, find out where it's at. If you can't find that, come back to the Run to Win group, and we can help you find numbers that you can supply when and if you need to.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds really important to know for sure. Okay. So our next question is, what's the best way to get information to voters about vote by mail?
This is going to be really specific to your community again. So I think number one, knowing what is happening in your state, in your community right now. Some states, the Secretary of State's office is sending out ballots, absentee ballots to every voter, every registered voter. Some are sending applications out. So every registered voter would get an application. And so that could be something that you want to encourage them to complete soon, so that they get their actual ballots. There's a number of different ways that might be happening. So thinking through that, and I just completely blanked on the question right now. I think I was not off track, but I apologize.
No, you're fine. It's about how people can get vote by mail, how voters can get that information.
So I was just in the middle of answering that. Yes. So those are the best ways. I will say, so depending on your state, there might be online applications also. So they could go on as a registered voter, or to register and also request a vote by mail. This is another place that you can definitely, you want to do the research so that you can walk people through it when you're calling through and asking if they have requested a ballot. They say no. If they would like to, you can walk them through that process also. So getting to know what the specific laws and rules are in your community is the important piece here. Do that research.
Got it. Yes. And I'm in Maryland, and I just received my application for vote by mail in the mail. So yeah, cool. Our next question is, I don't have Vote Builder. How should I track my data? And then kind of as an addition, how do I find out who has already turned in their ballot?
Yes. So once again, this is a state-specific piece. I'm going to start with the turning in the ballot. So this is where research on your Secretary of State's office and or local clerks is going to be important. Finding out what data they track and how you can get that data is the really important piece here. So,
Mhm.
like I said, they could put out a list, which would be weekly, of people who have requested ballots or, that kind of thing. There's not always, and then many places also provide lists of people whose returned ballots have arrived, but
Mhm.
not everybody does that. So it's very important for you to track through your campaign, when you know that a voter has, requested a ballot. It's important for you, while you're calling through people and that type of thing, to be tracking who has turned in their ballot, of your universes, and making sure that you have that information close to you. So with other pieces, um, you know, without Vote Builder or other programs to help you sort of break up your universe, you're probably using something like Excel. And so this is the same kind of thing. Finding what your universe is, figuring out who the voters are that you want to talk to. That's partly by requesting, voter information from the Secretary of State's office, or however that works specifically in your state, so that you know who has voted. This normally includes party registration, who has voted in what elections, and all of those types of things. So you can focus, and you can target folks who, you can have different stacks in your list of who always votes, who has not voted, in the last 4 years, or who only votes in presidentials, or who votes every single time. You can see all of that information, and you'll be able to separate your list that way. This is definitely a thing also, which I would go to the Run to Win community to talk about more, where other people's resources have come from, and what that looks like when they need to keep track of a whole bunch of information like this.
Definitely. And I'll plug the Run to Win community later on too, once we're closing out. Um, and
It's
our last question is, I'm running a small campaign with only volunteer staff, none of whom have a background in data. Do I need to hire someone to find and analyze data for me?
No, this is um, this is relatively simple. What you want to do is make sure, like, find a way to break down the information. Just as I was saying, you're going to have information on, depending on your state, of course, on what party registration looks like in your region, in your district, on what, generally the ages of your voters and gender, of course, the names, that type of thing. But you can also see what precincts they are in, and that type of, piece. So if there's places that you don't need to be focusing, you could, cut those out of your universe. But this is not something that you need to hire a specific data person for. It can be helpful if people have any experience with data to be able to break it down. But essentially, you are looking to find a couple of different important universes. One is the people who are completely with you and will vote for you no matter what, and you probably don't need to talk to them. So that would be strong Democrats who vote in every single election, and maybe are your donors or other folks like that. Like, they can get a digital message or an email even that's like, thank you so much for your support, make sure you vote. Those are not people that you need to spend a bunch of time on. And then with that, you also want to find the universe of folks who are just definitely not your supporters. So strong Republicans, particularly strong Republicans that vote every single election, they're probably not going to be your biggest fan. So you don't need to spend any time on them. Then there's a couple other blocks of people, and this is where arguably, these are the folks that you want to find that are most important for you. So Democrats who don't vote in every election, and you can break this into a couple different pieces. Really strong Democrats that vote in every election includes every primary election, but then there's Democrats who vote maybe every single, like, general election, or more importantly, what you're looking for right now will be Democrats that vote in every presidential election. So
Mm,
those are your two groups that are really important here, because, you want to make sure that they're getting out and actually voting, and that they know you exist. And if they only vote in presidentials, making sure they go down the ballot to also be voting for you is important.
true. that seems like data is super important, and it's great for all of us to somehow get to work with it. So that is actually our last question. So I'm going to move to closeout now, but I just really wanted to thank Rebecca from our state and local team. She clearly has a wealth of knowledge about GeoTV, and just thanking her for her time and teaching us all this great GeoTV information today. So I just want to thank all of you all now so much for joining our webinar today. We really hope that you learned a lot of valuable information for your GeoTV campaigns. And I just want to remind everyone that after this, we're going to be sending out a survey. So please give us some feedback to make these trainings so much better. And in the next few days, we're also going to be sending out an email with a video of the webinar so that you can refer back to it as much as you need to. And that email will also include some registration links to the next couple trainings that we have coming up, which are going to be awesome. So please join, especially if you're thinking of running for office. So at Emily's List, our Run to Win campaign is committed to training pro-choice Democratic women to run for office. So we want to make sure that you all are aware of some resources that we have for you. So on Facebook, we have a Run to Win Facebook community that you can join, and you can connect to seek advice from women candidates from the past, the present, and future about running for office. And we also have an Emily's List Training Center, which you currently see on the screen now. And this provides online courses and tools to help walk you through your campaign. So this has different modules, it has different handouts and things if you like that sort of kind of hands-on trainings. So please sign up there. It's at trainingcenter.emilyslist.org. And then lastly, I just want to thank all of our sponsors today for helping make our trainings possible. Thank you so much to our partners. And thanks so much for tuning in today, everyone. We'll be in touch soon. Take care and make sure to vote. I wore my vote t-shirt today. So elect women. Bye.